Let's talk Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, been one heck of an offseason for you fans, Raider Nation, and it's about to go to a whole nother level with the draft. Now, just a few short hours away, less than 24, probably by the time you're watching this video. And to that end, it looks like the Raiders are preparing to make kind of a sneaky move no one's really paying attention to, but I think it's a great sign for the future of Las Vegas. We'll get to that in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick, that is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, one of the bigger moves, if not the biggest player acquisition move the Raiders made this offseason was, of course, trading for Geno Smith, bringing him in to be their short-term and medium-term starter. But there is the question, Smith is on the older side. What's the long-term answer at quarterback? There have been some rumblings, and if you listen to some of these reports and read between the lines, it looks like the Raiders may be preparing to make one of the better moves of the draft. I think they're going after one guy in particular, maybe a hidden gem. Let's get into this report right here, multiple reports, and we'll go into detail on the other side. This first one is courtesy of Raiders Wire. It's a few days old. The Raiders have been doing their homework this all season on all the quarterbacks, and John Spytek, their general manager, made it clear that those visits are with the intention of drafting one if the talent matches up with the draft position. Remain open-minded, Spytek said about drafting a quarterback. Anyone that can help us at that position in particular is going to be up for consideration. You guys have all done your investigative journalism well enough to know that we brought some quarterbacks in, and that wasn't by accident by any means. And we remain open to the most important position in sports to get right. And we're super excited to have Geno here, and we continue to expect him to be here for a while. But you can't have too many of those guys. So what is Spytek doing? He is taking the same approach that Howie Roseman took in Philly, that Brett Veach took in Kansas City, that you look at Ozzie Newsome and Ortiz took with the Baltimore Ravens. They had quarterbacks, but while they had a quarterback, they went out and drafted a quarterback. In those examples, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson. It looks like John Spytek is trying to follow that exact same model. Now let's go into our second article here. It shines a little light on one guy in particular I think the Raiders are targeting. This is courtesy of Raiders Beat, talking about Jaylen Milroe. Milroe, per ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, would love to go to the Raiders and develop behind Geno Smith, who will turn 35 during the 2025 season. The Las Vegas Raiders, I know, are on Milroe's radar because they have Geno Smith, Fowler said on ESPN SportsCenter on Sunday. This is a few days ago now. The Raiders would be a team he would love to go to and slide behind Smith for a couple of years and learn. What's very interesting is that there were reports, courtesy of The Athletic, that the Raiders had interviews with Jaylen Milroe and were very impressed with him, I believe, during the combine process. Walked away very, very ecstatic with the mental side of his game, his charisma, his maturity, things like that. We all know Milroe has incredible athletic tools. In fact, there are reports that he's the best running quarterback since Lamar Jackson. He is seen as essentially the biggest boomer bust prospect in a number of years. Great deep ball, great physical tools, incredible athlete. Questionable accuracy at times, questionable passing technique, right? How can he play against competition, when he's not surrounded with Alabama level talent? There is a lot of question marks with Jaylen Milroe, but there's incredible upside as well. Seems like the kind of guy that Al Davis would love to wear the silver and black. Mark Davis is still around. Tom Brady is still, he's involved. He's part of that ethos. We talk about the Raiders. They made a lot of great moves getting back to, stability. I think right here they go after their franchise quarterback. I look at early in the second round going after and selecting Jaylen Milroe to be their future long after Geno Smith decides to hang him up. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Raider Nation, in the comment section below, give us your thoughts on if the Raiders select a quarterback, specifically Jaylen Milroe, right? Would you like that move? And we're talking second round. We're not talking top 10 pick here. Do you like that move? Do you think it would be a good job by Las Vegas? Do you hate that move? Give us your thoughts on picking a quarterback, specifically Jaylen Milroe. Give us your thoughts on both those situations. Maybe there's another quarterback you want them to pick. Let us know in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on the Las Vegas Raiders making, in my opinion, one of the potential big-time steals of the entire draft if they get Milroe?
Yeah, I think it would be a great move because Milroe, like you said, this is a guy who's looking already. He has it in his mind, hey, I need to sit, I need to develop, and I need to learn and grow. He knows he's not going to come in day one and start over a guy like Geno Smith. And I love that mentality of a guy who says, I'm sure he's a great competitor. We all know he has great athletic ability. Like you said, he's being kind of, linked to being the next big, athletic quarterback to come out of the draft since Lamar Jackson, which very impressive. Lamar Jackson's made it work in the league very, very well. And I think he's kind of set that mold that if you're athletic enough, if you're fast enough, that kind of air that, oh, you're just going to get hurt if you're running the ball that much, not necessarily true. So I really like this link with the Raiders and like the fact that, he could potentially come in here, sit behind Smith and learn the assets of Geno Smith's game. I think it'll rub off on him very, very well. And I think you go later into the article and they talk about, Milroe's been working with his quarterback coach, really trying to like up his game, make his game a little bit better. But he has this learning approach. He knows what he needs to do, he knows what he needs to fix. So I think, like you said, this is a pick that it'd be really high ceiling for the Raiders. A lot of people say he's boom or bust, and I do think he would be very boom or bust if you started him right away. If you draft him and throw him out there on the field week one and say, go ahead, show us what you got. I do think there's a boom or bust aspect there. But if I'm being honest, when I think about him coming and sitting and learning for a few years behind a top level quarterback like Geno Smith, I don't see it as that much boom or bust. I think there's a lot of boom potential, but I think his floor comes up significantly. So I really like the pick. I like the option there. Like you said, not first round. That would be kind of crazy if they were to get him in that top 10 area. I don't think it merits that. But if they're able to get him early second round, I think that would be a great pick for this Raiders team because he has the right mentality. He knows what he's coming in to do. I think he's truly going to sit behind, absorb, and learn behind Geno Smith. And I think doing so really brings his floor up a lot. And we all know how high his ceiling potentially is. So a great move here potentially for the Raiders to do this. I think overall it makes a whole lot of sense. And I think this is more and more sounding to me, if it's available, if all of the stars meet up here, which I think is very likely, that the Raiders are going to go ahead and grab Jaylen Milroe on night 2 of the draft.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So while you were talking, I just pulled up the NFL.com draft profile. I love NFL.com's draft profile just personally. And compared Jaylen Milroe with another former Alabama and later Oklahoma quarterback, Jalen Hurts. To me, the similarities are very striking. If you look at the overall rating according to NFL.com, Hurts was 84, Milroe's 81. If you look at the rounds they projected to go, Hurts was 2 to 3, rounds 2 to 3. Milroe's rounds 2 to 3. If you look at the QB comps, Jalen Hurts was compared to Tim Tebow, great college quarterback that flamed out as an NFL quarterback. Milroe's compared with Cordell Stewart, same kind of dynamic. So we're looking at very similar kind of players here. And when you dive deep into both these guys, now look, I think Jalen Hurts is one of the great stories in college football history with what he did at Alabama, got benched for Tua as a great teammate, goes on to do great things at Oklahoma. Milroe showed a lot of leadership too. One of the things people discount with Jaylen Milroe is that he stayed when Nick Saban, the legend, left, and he became the face of Alabama football after Nick Saban, right? That is incredibly hard to do. As much as Kalen DeBoer, their next head coach, had a lot of good credentials, all eyes were on Jaylen Milroe. He was the face, right? And it wasn't all pretty. There were some ups and downs, but he was the guy leading the charge, leading the team day in and day out, right? It's a lot like replacing Tom Brady when he was the quarterback in New England Patriots. You look at quarterbacks like Mac Jones, he kind of struggled with that. Patriots have taken a long time to overcome that. Milroe, the legend, left, and he stepped up in terms of his leadership qualities. I love to see that. The talent dipped, so you saw a little dip in production. But I think overall, everything you like about Jaylen Milroe was still present in 2024. And that, to me, is what makes me really excited. Because if you look at what Milroe brings to the table, he can make plays that no one else can. A lot of it with his legs, just game-breaking speed, scrambling, things like that. Great deep ball, ridiculous arm talent. And one of the things people have to remember about today's NFL is that in order to win championships with elite quarterbacks, right, you have to have a quarterback that can break NFL rules. You look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes is a phenomenal example of that. Aaron Rodgers, right, freakish talent kind of things. Matthew Stafford, redonkulous arm talent. You don't have, even if guys that haven't won championships like Lamar Jackson, like Josh Allen, they're aliens. They're just superhuman. It doesn't matter how good your defense is. They're just athletically can make plays that no one else can. Jaylen Milroe falls perfectly into that bucket. And again, there's a lot of boomer bust when you look at the his performance and the inconsistencies and the concerns. But you bring up a great point. The ultimate risk mitigator is learning behind a guy like Geno Smith, with a guy like Tom Brady, with a guy like Pete Carroll. I think Milroe's a perfect fit for the Raiders. I think the Raiders are a perfect fit for Milroe. Again, Geno Smith is the stability. He's the Alex Smith circa Kansas City Chiefs from about a decade ago. Gets the franchise on stable, gets on good footing, and when he's ready, a guy like Jaylen Milroe can take over the reins and lead the Raiders to newfound success.
Yeah, Nick, and I think there's a couple other things that while you talk really come to mind for me is you've got guys that are experienced and working with this kind of story. You say Pete Carroll, they bring in Russell Wilson, a guy kind of an underdog, kind of, more athletic, smaller size quarterback. I think Milroe is definitely a little bit bigger than Russell Wilson, but I think that's that same mindset as a guy in Pete Carroll who's been in that situation before, brought a guy in with I don't remember exactly how that all went. It was a while ago, but I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but when Russell came in, he definitely wasn't immediately the guy they looked for as like the day one they draft him. This is a guy that's going to be the starter. There was a guy in front of him, and he ended up working his way up there. So I think that's a situation that happened and is very similar to Jaylen Milroe. Jaylen Milroe is probably going to sit for a little bit longer than Russell Wilson did, but I think very similar. Then again, you talk about the Jalen Hurts comps. Everybody kind of forgets because Milroe came on strong in the end of his career. In the middle there, I think it's during the Saban years, there was a time where they benched Milroe for a couple of other guys, and they were like cycling that Milroe really hadn't caught on yet. Everybody was kind of unsure of him for a while there. They brought in a few other quarterbacks. I think Tyler Buckner was in there. Can't remember who the other guy was in there. They were cycling the guys through there. He stuck through it all. He worked his butt off and came in, earned the starting job back on, and then the rest is history. He did really great when he was at Alabama, won a whole lot of games for them. So I think this is a guy that, that comp is very comparable. I think he's very much like Jalen Hurts, and I think this is a very good situation for him. There's a lot of people that are equipped to deal with a guy like Jaylen Milroe and bring him up to the level that he needs to be, and I think he's just the guy for the job. I think if the stars align, this would be a perfect match for the Raiders.